Hey, it's Mark from Baker's Green Acres. As promised, I want to do a little series on the Declaratory Ruling, and I'll remind you that the Declaratory Ruling is downloadable. You can go to michigandnr.gov and just snoop around there a little bit and you'll find it. If I can find it, anyone can. It looks something like this. Alright, and I think it's important to do this because the last time we were in a hearing with the Attorney General's office, you remember they are the ones that are supporting the DNR in this case. They tried to distance themselves from this quite a bit, and so you know, there must be something here. They're pretty easy to read, but in that hearing it was kind of interesting. The hearing was about witnesses, and we wanted their guy, whose name is in this declaratory ruling several times. His name is Dr. Jack Mayer. He was under contract to the state of Michigan Department of Natural Resources as their expert. Remember, an expert, Mark Twain said, it's the guy from the next town over. And this guy is from way down there in Georgia, and they know everything there is to know about feral swine in Georgia. So we wanted Dr. Jack Mayer to come up because, you know, we read his book. And the message in his book is a little bit inconsistent with what the DNR is saying that he says. So that old trick, pretty sad, but they've misquoted him lots and lots of times. And I hope to bring that to your attention during this little series that we're going to do. It's a mini-series. I want to go through it fairly quick, maybe 3 or 4 parts, and kind of go from there. But people need to know why this is the wrong thing, because the techniques that the DNR is using, although they're not using them very well, are techniques that are used quite a bit against people when they want to get people to do things that that maybe the people don't want, but maybe some other entities do want. Now, who's driving this? I couldn't really say. I know that pork producers are involved with it, and others, but you know, we'll find that out as time goes on. I'm in the butcher shop right now, and I happen to be one of those people that has to do 2 things at a time in order to keep my mind focused. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I just think what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about the reason that we're here. This is negative stuff, but it's important that we do this because we want to preserve our right to do our lives the way we feel as though we should. Within the law, of course. But in this case, we're not even talking about law. We're talking about a declaratory ruling. The DNR has declared something, and then they're going to back it up with their little police force. Their police force are called conservation officers, and they look like paramilitary guys running around out there. And their job is supposed to be to check fishing licenses, but they take it a little further than that. Most people in Michigan can relate to that. But anyway, why are we even here? I raise a pig known as the Mangalitsa pig. It's out of Hungary. I've been at it for about 6 years now, maybe a little more. And I'm just in the butcher shop right now. I've been down here for a while cutting one up. And I thought, what a beautiful specimen that is. It's a pork chop, of course. It had a really thick fat on the top of it, and I've taken that off. And it looks something like this, you know. I took that off because people don't need that. They use this for something else. And you might say, well, that's too much fat. You've been duped. Fat's good for you. Fat is where the flavor is. And this stuff right here, you can take a cube of that, fry it up in a pan, and eat it, and it is outstanding. Fat from standard pigs fed genetically modified corn looks like whale blubber. And it's the stuff that's in pork and beans that you always push aside. You're not going to eat that. This stuff you will eat, and it's good for you. It's good for your joints, good for your hair, good for your brain. After all, your brain is just fat anyway, and you've got to replace those cells as they flush out. Replace them with this. We feed these animals a certain way, take care of them a certain way, we butcher them a certain way. It's all a discipline, and we are selling the pigs once again. We're a custom exempt shop, so we can do that. They have to leave here butchered. But anyway, let's go through this series and try to be a little bit more positive about this. Okay, declaratory ruling. It starts out on page 2. There's a bunch of fluff. You're welcome to read it. On page 2, there's 240.4 additional prohibited species sections. I don't know why they did that. Maybe just to fill the document up. But they say exactly the same thing. But all right. Number 1, possession of the following live species, including a hybrid or genetic variant of the species, an egg and offspring of the species, or of a hybrid or genetically engineered variant, is prohibited. The DNR has declared this. It's a declaratory ruling. They've declared it. And they have added feral pig to the Invasive Species Order. Invasive Species Order is good law. But they've added a farm animal to it. Who would ever think they'd do such a thing? And if they did it, who would ever think they'd get away with it? You would think somebody in the chain of command would say, hey, wait a minute, you can't do this. But that's not the case, because this is being driven by people that want this to happen. Okay? And the reason why, you'll have to put that together as time goes on. All right. A is New Zealand mud snail. That's not anything to do with us. We don't have those, right? Okay, then we get to B. Wild boar, wild hog, wild swine. I've written them right there. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. Wild boar. Wild denotes an animal that is in the environment that was not introduced by man. Okay, so I guess it was introduced by God. So we have in Michigan, we have chipmunks. Nobody brought those here from India and dropped them off. Like, that would be fun to do that. No, they were here. They were here when the Indians got here, and probably whoever was here before the Indians, there was chipmunks here. Same with white-tailed deer. They're wild animals, right? As opposed to, say, a Jersey cow. Those were brought here from Germany, and then they were bred for milk production. But they were not released out into the woods. They're domestic animals, domesticated animals, all right? Boar, hog, and swine. Those words all have the same meaning. Swine is the species, and then hog is a mature female, usually. Boar is an intact male. That means he has not been castrated. Okay, so a wild male pig, a wild female pig, and a wild swine. Wild. Where are there wild pigs in the world? Well, Dr. Jack Mayer's book gives us a very good idea of where wild pigs are, and there are none in North America. Never have been, never will be. They're all located in Eurasia, all right? So that's where wild pigs exist. So a wild pig could not be on someone's farm, and you can't blame a human being. So it's hard to prohibit a wild animal. It'd be like prohibiting white-tailed deer. Well, I have white-tailed deer come on my farm all the time. I don't invite them on, but they come on anyway and eat our alfalfa. If I were to trap one of them and then bring it into the barn and then trap a male or female and then bring that one in and then they mated and then they had a baby, that first one would be a domestic white-tailed deer, right? So you can see that a domesticated animal comes from a wild animal. Then we have another species, another category, and it's this right here. Feral pig, feral hog, feral swine. Again, swine, hog, pig, same meaning. Feral. Dr. Mayer's book gives a good definition of feral swine. And Dr. Jack Mayer, being an expert on this, let's just go right to his definition. Feral swine, or feral hogs, Suscrofa, are individuals from populations of wild living Suscrofa with a domestic ancestry. Okay? These include recently escaped or released animals and animals from populations that have been wild for more than one generation. So a feral animal, I'm sure you get this, but a feral animal has to be domesticated first. So let's say I get a wild deer. I get 2 wild deer, bring them up in my barn, they mate, they have a fawn. That fawn would be a domesticated deer. I keep that deer for a couple of years, and then it gets away. Or I take it and I put it in the woods. That's actually a feral deer at that point. But see, it has to be domesticated first. Feralness is a way of life. You can't really say that there's a characteristic of a feral animal, like an outward expressed characteristic of a feral animal. It's like being homeless. All right, you take the homeless guy, you give him a house, and you give him a job. He's not homeless anymore. Feral pig, let's say one of my pigs gets away, according to his definition, it gets away, and it has babies out in the woods. Then I catch them, and I bring them back to the farm. Well, they're not feral anymore because I got them back on the farm. So it's kind of a way of life. All right. So by definition, I can't have a feral pig on the farm because a feral pig is one that lives outside of the husbandry of human beings or the supervision of human beings. So I can't have feral pigs on my farm. I can't have wild pigs on my farm either. They exist over in Borneo. Right? They're not here. All right, then we get here to razorback. I don't think I'll even talk about that because the DNR has distanced themselves from that really well. That is more of a characteristic, and that's a characteristic that exists in this animal right here, a Eurasian wild boar. Eurasian wild boar and wild boar, wild hog, wild swine are really the same. The only place that wild pigs exist are actually in Eurasia. And Dr. Jack's book, although the title says Wild Pigs in the United States, in the foreword he explains that in reality there are no wild pigs in the United States, and he goes on to call them wild living pigs in the United States. So it's a little cagey. I wonder why the DNR contracted Dr. Jack Mayer, because I've gone through his book, and not only does the DNR misquote him continually, some of the things that he says in his book are kind of off kilter too, like the title of the book, Wild Pigs in the United States, but then in the foreword he says, well, there's not really any wild pig in the United States. I was just kidding, you know. It's just the title of the book. Why didn't you put the title of the book, Feral Pigs in the United States? Because we do not have wild pigs in the United States. Okay, anyway, let's go on. Eurasian wild boar, those are the animals that live in Eurasia, and they are wild. They are totally wild. Russian wild boar is a nickname for Eurasian wild boar because, you know, these Eurasia part of it is Russia, and they do have these animals in Russia. And, you know, they, when they're in isolated groups, they take on certain characteristics more than others. Same as human beings, like if you're in the sun a lot, your skin is dark. If you live in Antarctica, your skin is light. So it's the same thing with pigs, depending on where they live. The pigs that are over in Hawaii look a lot different than the pigs that live in Texas. The ones in Texas and the ones in Florida don't even look the same, quite different because the environment is different. Okay, so these monikers right here exist in this declaratory ruling. The problem with these monikers are you as a citizen, and maybe someone that raises pigs, maybe 4-H pigs, you get a hold of this and you find out there's some farmer that's being fined a whole bunch of money and all this, and you get hold of this and you say, well, gee, I don't know if I have any of these. I really don't know. So then you would be told to go over to page 3. And in page 3, that's where the descriptive characteristics are of feral pigs. And we'll pick it up there next time. Thanks.